This is Metabolic Mastery, a core medical technologies podcast dedicated to advancing knowledge and practice in metabolic testing. Welcome to Metabolic Mastery. I'm Dr. Marc Humbert. This is my co-host, Dr. Cameron Garber. And today we're going to be talking about how your VO2 test can reveal your fitness story. So this will be fun to dive into.
Yeah.
Cameron's a fortune teller.
I can be sometimes.
So let's talk first about what all VO2 testing is, right? We hear VO2, you hear that talked about in the media, and like that is one element of a good VO2 test, but there's actually so much more that we can learn, and that really factors into the picture that your VO2 test can paint.
Right. Well, and we call it VO2 testing because VO2 max is kind of the most popular test available. But actually, there are a bunch of other different ways to test, and VO2 is really only talking about oxygen consumption when we've got VCO2 that you can measure as well, which is the amount of carbon dioxide produced in burning calories. And so when we talk about a metabolic test, when we're looking at both O2 and CO2, that's really when lots of insights come into the picture as well. And so, you know, metabolic testing or CPET, cardiopulmonary exercise testing, there's so much more that you can glean from that when we're doing both O2 and CO2. And so, you know, we call it often VO2 testing or VO2 max, but there's so much more than just VO2 max that you can do with the Cardio Coach Pro. And that's one of the reasons why I love it, is because you can dive deeper into looking at substrate utilization, so fat and carbohydrate utilization during exercise and during rest and during all kinds of other, you know, forms of testing other than just VO2 max. You can do more longer form efforts where we can really dive into how is somebody actually performing. So I love that, and it gives so many insights into whether it's an athlete or whether it's a weekend warrior or you just have somebody looking to begin their fitness journey. There's so much more that we can dive into how to make sure that that person is exercising according to their body. Absolutely. And what's going to help them the most in whatever stage they're in. And so it's really fun to be able to do that test. And like Marc said, kind of peer into the crystal ball and look into past, present, and future, if you will. So you can, with a really well done VO2 test, you can see a lot of insights into how they've been training, where they're currently at, and then it also gives you that opportunity to say, if we want to modify these things, here's how you should train in the future, so that we can have a different outcome if their current results are not what we're looking for.
Yeah. Well, and it's beautiful because sometimes people end up spinning their wheels in fitness
all the time.
And this can give us just such a better idea of, what have they been doing and what do we want to do moving forward. And the reality is, we've joked about before, like, everyone has a metabolism, even if you think you don't, right? My metabolism just ran away. But that all of us have lungs, all of us have blood vessels, all of us have mitochondria, right? We're taking the energy from food.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like a feud in my tummy after a bad meal. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Gummy
worms. I ate a lot of gummy worms on a recent trip, so, you know, fun times. But that we're taking the energy from food, and then we're breaking that down and releasing it as carbon dioxide, right? So we bring in oxygen and then use that to process the energy and then breathe out carbon dioxide. And so that really does give us a more complete metabolic picture, and we can use that to make some really cool insights and use that to help us make decisions. So at what point in running VO2 tests, right, you run a ton over your time using the machine, when did you first start to recognize some of those patterns? Like, hey, you know what? They're probably this type of athlete, or you know what? They're probably fueling this way, or their training probably looks a lot like this.
Yeah, that's a great question. Probably there's a really common thing, especially when you're working with people who their desire is to lose weight. There's a really common phrase that I kept hearing that made me kind of go back into it and look at the patterns. And it was, I've tried everything. And so often when you're talking with whether it's and their profiles look a little bit different often, but when you're dealing with like the mom of 3 kids who's trying to lose that baby weight and just can't seem to get or keep it off, or kind of that perimenopausal woman who has literally over the years tried everything and has lost 20 and gained 25 back numerous times. And that, hearing that phrase so often, I've tried everything, often in tears, made me kind of take a deeper look into what's going on. Why have these people so often struggled to lose the weight? Where's that coming from? And kind of what are the commonalities between people who have tried everything, and what are they doing that isn't working, and things, so that I could help counsel them into what can we be doing next to overcome that. And a lot of what we found is too much moderate intensity, not enough high intensity, and very little, if any, low intensity work. And so that it kind of frustrated their results and frustrated what they were doing. A lot of it was trying to combine cardio and weights in the same workout, some of those things. And so just diving into those stories and listening to the people in front of me and then comparing their story with the results, it really helped me to be able to read into, okay, this is exactly what's happening and why and where we go from here. Yeah.
So let's dive into some of those individual metrics. And I think maybe starting with what you talked about is what you're seeing is this very broad, moderate intensity zone when you're doing their testing. And what leads to that, and what are the consequences of doing a high volume of training just there?
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the first things that I would see is having this massive zone 3, very low total calorie burn. So that's kind of this typical pattern of somebody that says, oh, I've tried everything. We're going to see a very low total calorie burn, a big zone 3, and then fat burning is almost non-existent. You'll have somebody that even can have decent fitness, will be, in a fairly high fitness category, but a lot of that's because they're very good at suffering. They're hanging on around that anaerobic threshold for quite a long time. And so they can handle suffering, but they're not actually very good at burning fat. So their endurance is poor. Even though they can suffer for a little bit, we're talking, 3 to 6 minutes. Whereas if we had them go and do a longer sustained effort, they wouldn't do very well. And so that led me to ask a lot of questions about, well, what are you doing for your fitness and things like that. And we found that a lot of the kind of high intensity HIIT style classes that are like 30 to 45 minutes long, that are combining cardio and weights or cardio and strength training, are a common denominator in their fitness. And so on their results, we'd see that very low fat burn, huge zone 3, very small, if any, real zone 2, and then a decent size zone 5, but it was at a fairly low intensity compared to what they would be if they were more fit and things. And so total calorie burn very low, which also is typically suggestive of a low calorie diet. So that always prompts me to say, how many calories are you targeting in your diet? How much are you eating? And often it's 1,000, 1,200 calories. Unfortunately, a lot of the popular fitness apps out there recommend for all women or most women to eat like 1,200 calories. When I would argue for most people, even if your goal is weight loss, it should most likely be more than that.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose weight and feel better and be able to build lean muscle and things like that if you fuel your body with more calories than 1,200 calories. And obviously there are some people that 1,200 is appropriate for, and that's why we do the testing.
Exactly.
We do the RMR test so that we can figure that out. And that's, again, one of the things I love about the cardio coach is it does a really good RMR test and a really good VO2 test. So if you can see here on the Cardio Coach, I don't know if that's in the shot or not, but you've got both the two chambers, right? So it's got for the RMR and the VO2, and so they're both calibrated to being able to be very sensitive for an exercise test or the resting test, and so it gets really, really good, accurate RMR values. So I love that we can dial in somebody's nutrition as well as their fitness, kind of all in one appointment, all in one testing session.
Well, and finding that sometimes people are just not eating enough, and that's a nice tool to be able to use. Again, it's putting you on the same side as the person in front of you and saying like, hey, if we want to feel better, perform well, we're going to need to increase your calories, right? Or this is what you should be aware of as you make fueling choices so that you can fuel yourself well for activity, for exercise, for recovery.
Well, that's honestly one of the things that I love about the Cardio Coach the very most, and the results that it provides is that it allows me to have meaningful conversations with people. It allows me to take a look at what they're doing and what they have been doing and say, okay, here's the where you're at and the changes that we need to make. And often people will be like, so I've been doing it wrong the whole time? And I love it because when we have objective data, we can take the blame off the person and be like, no, it's not that you were doing it wrong. It's just that it's not optimized for where you're at. Any effort you are making is good because it builds habits and things like that. And so don't beat yourself up over the fact that it wasn't dialed in. That's why you're here. That's why you're doing the testing. So the fact that you're here today with me means you're doing things right and you're getting more information. And so let's just build on the effort that you were putting in by dialing that in to where you need to be. And so I try to take the blame off them and make it so it's not a right or wrong way to do it. You mean I've been exercising wrong my whole life? No. The fact that you were exercising is awesome.
Yeah.
And you're better than 90% of America by getting out there and exercising. So awesome. You're doing great. Let's just dial that in so that your fitness effort matches your fitness goal better and you can, see success where you weren't in the past.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things I absolutely love is that it allows me that ability to line up those things, their fitness effort, their nutritional effort with what their actual goals are. And so we can dial those things in and they see success.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you said about like those efforts aren't wasted. Because sometimes when we're getting into the nuance of like setting zones and looking at how you're doing things, we're going to say, hey, this is going to be more optimized. If this is your goal, we're going to want to do this. And I feel like sometimes that comes off to people as like, oh, this is bad. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it may not be optimized for what you're wanting to do. And so as you're talking about this really broad, moderate training zone, again, for general cardiovascular health, like so glad that you're exercising, right?
Yeah,
that's going to have
doing good things for your health.
Doing good things, right? We know that increased cardiorespiratory fitness decreases your risk for so many different conditions and from early death. And so, again, from that general standpoint, it's doing good things overall. But when we have that really broad moderate zone and when we don't have that ability to switch between fuel sources, then often it leads to burnout, fatigue, injury, and things like that.
Right.
And I think really understanding it in terms of energy systems, right? Our body has multiple energy systems, and being able to easily and flexibly switch between them means that we can use the best fuel for whatever situation that we're currently in. Mm-hmm. And so, you talked about limited endurance, and we've talked about on the podcast before, right? We only have so much carbohydrate stored on our body, and it's distributed, and so like the glycogen in my bicep, I'm not moving that to my quad, right?
Yeah.
And so there's just fewer calories that I can use to fuel my exercise from the stored carbohydrate. And so if I can use that fat more often, if I can dip into that, if I can switch between those fuel sources really easily, then I can be a lot more efficient in my efforts. And I can last for longer in whatever I'm doing, right? Whether it's I'm running a race or I'm just hiking this mountain with my kids or grandkids or my friends.
Right. Or just running around the yard with the kids or, whatever it is, you have more capacity to do because you've built a bigger engine.
Yeah. So let's talk about building capacity and what we want to expand, what zone we want to expand within the test, with our training.
Yeah, so oftentimes we talk about this 5-zone system where zone 1 is low intensity kind of sub exercise threshold. It's more of a recovery phase or whatever, and really isn't exercise per se. There's not a whole lot of benefits we get to it other than just moving and keeping fluid moving through our body. But there's not much of an exercise effect to a zone 1 effort. A zone 2 effort, we start to see some benefits and well, lots of benefits, and we really dial into fat metabolism there, and that's where we build a really big base of fitness and a big base of capacity. So zone 2 training does all kinds of great things for our body, and really should be the bulk of where our training is. And I subscribe to that 80-20 concept of 80% of our training should be in that zone 2 low intensity effort, and 20% should be high zone 4, zone 5 efforts. Not to say that you can't be at 90-10 or 70-30 during different parts of your training cycle, but the average should be around 80-20. Anyway, so yeah, zone 2, all those huge benefits of just building a really big base and training your body to be more efficient at delivering fat to the muscles so that you have this great big engine. Zone 3 is what I lovingly call the no progress zone. It's not bad for you. There are cardiovascular benefits, and you will see some improvements up to a point, and then we typically see plateau. Again, a lot of that comes because of carbohydrate utilization and other things, that it's working hard enough that we deplete ourselves somewhat, and so we're always playing this catch-up game, whereas in zone 2 those efforts really don't deplete us very much at all, and so the recovery from that is very minimal, and we can do it again day after day after day. So the zone 3 just creates more of a recovery gap, and it doesn't, because we're not burning fat optimally, it doesn't really optimize for fat burning, so we don't get as much fat burning adaptation. But also because zone 3 is already in a range that I can do that. For most of us, obviously well-trained athletes, it's a little bit different. But for most of us, zone 3 is kind of that, I can do it for a half hour to an hour and a half and push myself fairly hard for that length of time. So obviously my half hour amount of how hard I can push myself is going to be harder than the hour and a half. But that's kind of the ranges for most of us of how hard we can push and sustain that, and that's usually your zone 3 is those efforts. And in that zone, we're just not moving the needle very much in terms of progress, because I can already do it. It's not hard enough that it's actually making my body make adaptations and change, because it's already within the range of what I can do. And so that's part of the problem, is we're much slower in terms of driving change in zone 3, and we just dig this big recovery hole. And so if we're doing that day after day, we're more likely to get injured, fatigued, things like that. And then your zone 4 efforts, those are going to be more high intensity. I can sustain those for 15 to 30 minutes depending on the person and how well trained they are. Some people it's more like 5 to 10 minutes. And then your zone 5 efforts for most people are 1 to 3 minutes. Some can, elite athletes can hang out there for much, much longer periods of time, but that's kind of the thing. But that's where real improvement happens, is kind of that high zone 4, zone 5 efforts, kind of right around your anaerobic threshold or above your anaerobic threshold or VO2 max thresholds. Working out in those high intensities, that's working out harder than we can currently sustain, and that's where we drive a lot of change. Both, so from a mechanics standpoint, to get more efficient, I have to automatically kind of correct some of those mechanical issues, and the harder we push, a lot of the time it helps correct those things naturally without much instruction even. Those zone 5 efforts really push change. And so that's kind of, if we're breaking down those 5 zones, that's kind of the layman's term version of that.
Yeah. Well, and in that way, it's making low intensity truly low intensity, and
right.
Making high intensity truly high intensity, and we often hear it as polarized training.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting because in this world, there is just so much argument about what's best, what's optimal.
Yeah.
And I love what you said earlier about our training should match our fitness goals, right?
Right.
And are we just listening to people whose goals are completely different than our own? That can help us to sift through a lot of the information out there. But we talked about this with Parker Spencer when he was on the podcast, and he talked about having the science background, but then also having the training background, and what that can do to our vision about what things should look like. And granted, not everyone is an elite athlete, but there's things that we can learn from the training regimes of elite athletes that just make sense, right? We have decades worth of data. And so you see this argument between zone 2 style training, HIIT training, this one's better, and no, you only need, zone 4, zone 5, the high intensity training, no, you only need zone 2. Well, this is what's happening with, your cells and your mitochondria and this,
Right.
And there's all this argument. But when we look at the science, right, what does the science tell us? And then we look at that training history, we find that people that perform the best and that live really long lives have that high volume of base training, right? That zone 2 training, where it's relatively easy and they can accumulate a high volume, as you said, without burnout, injury, fatigue. And they're still getting that high intensity so that it's pushing the edge of what they can do, right? It's affecting their cardiovascular system, their musculoskeletal system, their neuromuscular system. Like all those systems are having to get tuned up to allow for that top end performance.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like it's not this either or. It's enough of both that we're getting the effects that are going to lead us to staying in the game, growing our health, growing our capacity, and being able to do that ad infinitum.
Yeah.
That we aren't dropping out because we're just burned out, because we're injured.
Right.
And I think that's the nuance that we often miss in highlighting our favorite, method of working out. Is the baseline question is, what can I do on repeat for decades so that my health, that my quality of life, that my quality of health stays elevated for as long as possible. And if I get dropped out of the game again and again and again and again, like that severely impacts my progress over years and decades. It's the law of compounding, either in the positive direction or in the negative direction.
Absolutely. And whether that's in the game of life, how long we want to stay in the game of life, or in our individual sport, like how long we want to be able to participate in that. A lot of that comes down to exactly what you were saying, being able to keep training and keep those training cycles going without having interruptions because of burnout, fatigue, injury. And that's huge. So I like to simplify it a lot of the time for my clients when they come in. I talk about a 3-zone system. We still use the 5 zones.
Oh no,
from
more
the
zones.
device. Yeah. But these 3 zones are very simplified. You have a comfortable zone, you have a comfortably uncomfortable zone, and you have an uncomfortable zone. And the idea is comfortably uncomfortable is kind of that zone 3, that I can do this for half hour to hour and a half. Like I'm used to suffering in this way. That's the no progress zone. It's not bad for you. It just, you're going to see less progress and have more likelihood of injury, fatigue, illness, and problems, right? And so the idea is the bigger you can get your comfortable zone to be, the better. And what happens is what used to be part of your comfortably uncomfortable zone can turn into your comfortable zone. But here's the caveat to that. That doesn't come as well and likely won't come at all by just doing more training in the comfortably uncomfortable zone. It may get more used to it, but it won't necessarily physiologically become your comfortable zone as quickly or as well or without injury as if we actually polarize our training more and spend more time in the comfortable zone, in that like I could do this again tomorrow and the next day and the next. And that's kind of the point. When you get done with a zone 2 workout, you should be able to kind of say, I could do that again. And that's the whole point, so that you can do it again day after day. And so you're not going to see as much progress as if you polarize it, doing more time in the comfortable zone and more time in the uncomfortable zone, that's actually going to push your comfortable zone bigger than it will to spend more time in the comfortably uncomfortable zone, if that makes sense. And so the bigger you can make that comfortable zone, or the bigger your zone 2 and the bigger your zone 5, the better of an athlete you typically are in terms of endurance type activities especially. Obviously, there's caveats to if you're a sprint athlete and things like that. That's going to flip some of this on its head, and we're going to go after different goals and things. But typically speaking, for life and just lifestyle, the bigger your zone 2, the more you're going to have energy and feel good and have greater capacity longer into life and deal with injuries and fatigue less. And then the more that we can have a big zone 5 and have a lot of capacity to really be uncomfortable for a longer period of time, that's going to help stave off aging and slowing down and things like that, because we're constantly dropping off just because of aging and timing and things like that. Our capacity is dropping off. And if we're not trying to improve, we're not going to level out the dropping off. And so I always say we're trying to slow down the slowing down of life. And the more that we're working to improve, the more we're going to slow that down. And so that's why those zone 5 efforts are important, is to help slow down the slowing down. And that's also why strength training is important, so we can maintain a high lean muscle mass so that we have the engine to be able to tune up with our cardiovascular training. You know, we build the engine with strength training, we tune that engine up and keep it running efficiently with our cardiovascular training. And that combination really builds this nice engine that we can ride on into the future, ride on into the sunset with.
Right into the sunset. So one of the things that I think about, and I'm sure other people think about, is that sounds like a lot. You know, I have this busy job, I have this busy life. You know, I'm supposed to do a lot of zone 2 training, and then I'm supposed to get the zone 4, zone 5 training, and then I'm supposed to get some strength training in, and then, I better make sure that I'm doing, some plyo or things to work on speed and reactivity. I am, I have this career and I have this many kids and I have these responsibilities. How is that even possible? Like, what would you say to that?
I would say start where you're at and build on that. You don't have to be doing all the things today, right? It's really easy to want to see this checklist of things that I need to have in my fitness world and the things that I should and shouldn't be eating and all the things. It's a lot for sure. And the good news is that most of us have time. You know, I talk a lot with people about training for the 80-year-old you. You know, stop training for the now you and start training for the 80-year-old you. And so it's just taking each principle one at a time and starting to slowly incorporate that into your life and lifestyle. And so for a while, maybe just focus on zone 2 effort and building a really big base. And then once you feel like you've got a pretty good base, start adding in the zone 4, 5 stuff and growing that and improving your fitness and things like that. And increasing the amount of time, and then start supporting those efforts by doing some strength training. Or you may start with the strength training and build a really big engine and then start tuning up that engine. You know, whatever works for you. We kind of have a basic set of rules that we tell people in terms of how to build up. And it really is based on science and what has been shown to be the most effective way to improve someone's fitness. If we start with the intensity of what they're doing first, they're more likely to get injured or burn out. If we start with just focusing on the frequency of their effort, so even if it's a 5-minute effort below a level that will do much change, but just start at, let's focus on the frequency of what they're doing and build a habit, and it becomes part of their lifestyle, then that's ideal, because we can take that frequency and then build the duration is the next step. And so if we take a 5-minute effort that they do intentionally for their fitness every day, and they build that habit of doing this 5-minute effort, it's still going to probably be below the threshold of doing much good for them, but they built that habit. They're more likely to stick with that, and then we build the duration of that and say, okay, now let's make it a 10-minute habit. Now let's make it a 20-minute habit, and so on. And about the 20 minutes a day habit range, we start to actually see some changes where they notice some benefits in their health and fitness, and we can then really start to build on that. And so once they get to where they're doing something every day for their fitness that's intentional, not like, oh, well, I went to Costco and walked around it's like, no, that doesn't count. You would have done that anyway. I'm talking intentional efforts for your fitness. Once you start incorporating those things, then what they're doing starts to matter a little bit more, and we can build on the intensity side of things. But until they've established the habit, the what of what they do for their fitness really doesn't matter as much. And where the testing comes in is just helping them avoid self-sabotage of overdoing and training too hard and getting too sore, too fatigued, too burnt out by it. And so if we can help them set a clear zone 2 effort that's easy and whatever, and then help them build those habits up and focus first on that frequency, then build the duration. Once they've hit a meaningful point where they're exercising enough and it's incorporated into their lifestyle enough, then we can start worrying more about the what of what they're doing. And then we really can use this testing, retest them, and really help them take off in their fitness.
Yeah, one, that retesting ends up being so important because it's like, what do we need to tweak? Are you moving in the direction of your goals? Okay, let's take a look at what happened and reevaluate. And I just love this idea of, like, there are so many different entry points to exercise.
So many, yeah.
But in selecting what we're going to do, again, what's going to keep me in the game for the longest period of time? And can I turn those things into a habit? Yeah. You just see when people have a supportive environment and they've built habits, that just makes things so much easier than when I'm just trying to white knuckle what I'm doing all the time, right? Yeah. That gets exhausting over time.
Yeah. And
so, yeah, I lots of entry points into exercise and small and simple changes, right? We're not having to do everything all at once. You know, I've got to be the perfect athlete now. Yeah. It's what can I successfully, confidently put into my routine and then begin to do that on a repeat. So I want to dive into a couple of stories that we both have. So in a second, I'm going to have you tell me about the client that you were talking to me about yesterday. But in contrast to that, I want to talk about another test that I was looking at. And they'd been training consistently for quite a while. And look at their results, and over time their fat oxidation is going down, and VO2 stayed kind of steady for the most part. One went up a little bit, one went down. And so when I looked into the test and what was happening, and then hearing about their training, it was really clear that they actually hadn't been doing the type of training that they thought they were doing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people consider, I'm doing zone 2, right? This thing said that I'm in my zone 2 and I've been doing that effort, and now like things are getting worse. Like, what's going on? And what happened is that their zone 2 intensity was actually really low, much lower than they'd been training.
Like 15 beats per minute, less than what they were
training.
Yeah.
And so the wild thing was they were training in that moderate zone, and then the next time they tested, their zone 2 had shrunk because they were not focusing on optimizing their ability to oxidize fat. And so then, even though their zone 2 dropped, they still weren't like they were still training in their zone 3, and then that dropped again, still training their zone 3.
And their VO2 max didn't go up, and all those things, which we would expect VO2 max to rise with 6-8 weeks of training. If they're being consistent, we would expect an improvement there.
Yeah. And so, again, this pattern that we're seeing is that we're actually training in that comfortably uncomfortable zone too often.
Yeah.
And it's actually diminishing our gains in some of the areas and preventing them from really having enough gas in the tank to hit it as hard as they might otherwise do on those hard efforts, pushing up their VO2 on that top end.
Yeah.
And so, like... frustrating for them that they think that they're putting in this effort and actually it ends up being much higher.
Yeah.
And so like that's one of the things that we find with zone 2 training is for people that are first getting this testing done, it's much, much lower than they anticipate. And psychologically, like that's a difficult pill for a lot of people to swallow, right? When grandma and grandpa are passing you on the trails and you're just walking or lightly jogging, like that's kind of an ego hit.
Yeah.
But when we stay consistently in and train in that zone 2, we can see some really cool improvements, which brings us to the story of the client you were telling me about.
I'm wondering which one. Was it the, well, I think
BMI.
normal BMI or high BMI?
High BMI.
Oh, okay. Well, so I'm going to compare and contrast that with a normal BMI person and a high BMI person. So with this person with a high BMI, so she's 318 pounds and has had a really hard time with fitness, a lot of life situations and things like that. But has recently decided she wants to change all of that and has started just going with her brother. They're kind of supporting each other in going to the gym. And so she started just where she could. So she's walking on the treadmill. She had broken her foot the year before, and so she felt like walking's the only thing that she could do. Unbeknownst to her, it was the best thing she could do. And she's beating herself up for not being able to run or jog or things like that more. And so she's walking on the treadmill, and then she just decided that they were going to start doing some strength training. And so she said, I don't know my way around the gym very well, but these machines, I'm going to just do 3 upper body and 2 lower body exercises on the different machines, and we're going to call that good. And honestly, if I was to tell somebody how to start out from where she's at, that's almost exactly what I would say. And so we were able to dial in how, where her walking should be with the test and things like that. But she was actually doing the right things. It was awesome. And looking at her metabolic profile was amazing because she actually was really good at burning fat. She had, her graphs looked perfect the way we'd want to see them. And so she'd already kind of jump-started the program. That's where I usually want people to be after the first 6 to 8 weeks or so. And so she was burning about 372 fat calories an hour in her peak fat burning area at a fairly low intensity. So for her, it was like a walk at 2.8 to 3 miles an hour with no incline or 1% incline, I think. And so for her, that was the sweet spot. Really easy effort, honestly. And so we talked about doing that. And then in a couple more weeks, once she's been walking a little bit more, so she's been trading off between the bike and walking because of the ankle issue. And so I said, as the ankle starts to feel better and you're not having any issues with that, start incorporating some higher intensity bouts on the treadmill. But you can do some of the high intensity stuff on the bike, where you just push it once a week for like a couple of minutes. So we're going to start out at 95.5 and build our way toward 80-20 in terms of the high intensity, low intensity, just so her body gets used to those higher intensity efforts. And so her fat burning was already great. She didn't have much of a zone 5 or things like that. She had a really big zone 3, and that's fine. That's what we anticipated, and she can improve upon that. So I contrast that with a normal BMI, 21 BMI, 54-year-old female who came in and is saying, yeah, going through menopause and things, just what's been working for me for the last 30 years is no longer working, and what's going on. So I look at her test and I see 0 fat burn. At her very best, she burned 80 or 96 fat calories an hour. So if 1 pound of fat is 35 to 4,200 calories, depending on cell walls and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, you're talking 35 to 40 hours of exercise to lose 1 pound of fat. That seems really daunting and makes a lot of sense as to why she's not losing weight, right? Exercise or just lifestyle and activity or whatever. But still, if her fat burn is that poor, it makes sense that controlling her weight like she was before isn't working. So it's not that she'd gained a lot of weight, but she felt like she was seeing body composition changes. She was up a few pounds, and what she'd normally done in the past just wasn't working. And so she was trying to get in early to curb this. Part of what she'd been doing. So when I look at her test, I see a really low total calorie amount, burning at her maximum intensity 535 calories an hour, which is wildly low. This other gal burned over 800 calories an hour, which is still lower than what she maybe could or should for being 318 pounds, but was quite a bit higher than this other person who was very fit. So the 318 pound person had a VO2 max of 18, so very, very low. Would be considered a disability in some cases. So the other gal had, I believe she was at 33, which put her in not the superior category, but just one down. So still very good.
Fit.
Yeah, very fit. And we looked at that. So 535 max calories, which means her engine's not very big. Probably doesn't have a lot of lean muscle mass. And then I saw that she was able to stay right at her anaerobic threshold, like kind of hovering right around her anaerobic threshold for 6 minutes before she went anaerobic. And
good at suffering.
Good at suffering. So she can push herself for so long. Very good at suffering, but really not good at burning fat. Huge, or big zone 3, huge zone 4, 5. Huge zone 4, I guess, and not a great zone 5. And then absolutely zero zone 2. Not good at burning fat at all. And so this totally made me go, okay, what's going on here? And this is the pattern that I actually see quite often in the I've tried everything folks. So the first question I asked her was, how many calories a day are you targeting? Like, how many calories a day are you eating? Well, I've been trying to lose weight, so I've been shooting for like 1,000 to 1,200. Okay, that tracks that she's burning so few calories. I said, have you, in doing that, have you had a lot of injuries lately? Oh yeah, I've had a major injury the last 3 years. Okay, that tracks. That we're working out at a high intensity. Said in most of the fitness that you're doing, is it kind of high intensity, like HIIT style classes, combining cardio and weights, your body pump or your boot camp style classes, dance fitness type stuff? Yeah, I do mostly classes for my fitness because it's just easy. I don't have to think about it. Okay, not that those things are all bad, but they may not be in line with what your goals are, and probably shouldn't be the bulk of your fitness. To do that once a week is totally fine. To do that every day, that's how we build the metabolic profile that we're seeing. And so calorie restriction plus high intensity combining cardio and weights. It said, have you also noticed that you're having to lift fewer or less weight with every few months? You're having to put lower weights on instead of building strength. Yeah, I used to do like 15 or 20 pound weights, and now I'm down to like 5 with everything because I just can't, my body just can't do it. Okay, all of this tracks, and it's not just menopause. It's the way that you're training is digging this big carbohydrate recovery hole every day, and so you're always in a recovery state instead of being able to build your body up. And so we switched up the way she was training, and so that when we talk about the crystal ball, that was exactly it. It allowed me to see her profile, ask a few questions, and I knew exactly the way she was training. With every question I asked, she's like, how did you know? Like, how did you know I was eating so few calories? And it's like, well, it's all in the tea leaves, right? Of their test. I could see what was going on just from those results. And so it allowed me to ask the right questions. And then from there, it allowed me to intervene and say, okay, so here's how we're going to change things up. So we're going to take your strength training and cardio and we're going to split it. We're not going to do that as one and done. We're going to have you just lift heavy things for a while and build your lean muscle back up. We're going to have you start eating more calories, and we talked about that. And we're going to have you, for now, just at first, we're going to just focus on the fat burning. So we're just going to go zone 2 effort, like really light, just walk for a bit. And then we're going to build back up into doing the zone 4-5 and kind of start at the 95-5 again and build to the 80-20, all of that fun stuff. So we were able to have those conversations. And it's awesome that you can look at their test and with a few questions know exactly how they've been training and also then what to do for their training to help them match what they'd like to do, which for her, it was, I want to just feel good. I want to be able to do all the activities with my husband and grandkids and she wanted to be able to not feel so sluggish and poor and have these injuries and stuff like that. And so, yeah, it was great to be able to line those two things up for her and help her be able to have more success in her training.
Absolutely. Well, and I think what's so cool is that we're still appreciating the client's lived experience, right?
Yeah.
You're not just saying, oh, well, none of that stuff that you did matters, right? Your story doesn't matter.
Right.
It's okay, like, tell me your story, and then let's take the data that we're getting from the cardio coach and then use that to make better decisions.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, that is such a common profile that we see. And the nice thing about having this data is that we can say, like, hey, it's not just menopause. It's not just, your body's broken. It's not this. It's
Right.
just that we haven't been optimizing for the type of training that's really going to be in line with what's happening with your body real time right now.
That's such an important message. You're not at fault and your body's not broken.
Yeah.
Right? That, a lot of it's just the messages we're given by the fitness industry, who they're not maliciously trying to do it. They're just trying to make money, which we all are. And so oftentimes what makes money and what's effective are not the same thing.
Absolutely. Well, I think understanding that, yes, we all have the anatomy and physiology are variations on a theme.
Yeah.
But within that variation, there's so many factors that can influence, am I making progress or am I not making progress? And so being able to look at those things and understand how amazing our bodies are at adapting. That's, I think, one of the coolest things that we can see through this type of testing is, one, how people's bodies have adapted to what they're asking them to do so far, and what we can ask the body to do through a really good optimized training regime. And in that specific situation that you're giving, right, of feeling burnt out and getting injured and fatigued, it's again, our body's really good at adapting. And so if it's not getting enough fuel on one end, right, we've dropped our calories so low because we want to lose weight, then it's not having the substrate, the building blocks that it needs for bone, for muscle, for all those things, right? We find this commonly in female athletes, right? The female athlete triad, or now they call it RED-S, relative energy deficiency in sport, but that they end up even losing their period, right? Their reproductive system downregulates function because they don't have enough building blocks. They don't have enough energy to devote to those systems.
Well, we see it in men too. It just presents a little bit differently. There's a lot of talk about low testosterone and other things like that, and different in the nuances, but similar in the fact that it's poor sleep, poor nutrition, and overtraining often leads to that low testosterone state and things like that.
Yeah, and in tendon repair and recovery, muscle, all of these tissues just can't keep up. And like you said earlier, we're just digging in that recovery bucket and never fully giving ourselves a chance to heal, to recover, to improve. And so we're not fueling ourselves enough on this end. We're going too intense too often on this end and burning ourselves out. And one of the things to understand, I think, about what's talked about in the fitness field is people that are the high end, that are able to handle a lot of intensity and a lot of volume, earned their way into doing that.
Yeah.
And so, but the difficulty is they're like, well, just do what I do and then you'll be successful.
Right.
But we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. We're not seeing the foundation of everything that went into that, right? Genetics and training history and nutrition and all these different things go into where, people that are in high fitness are at. And so just taking a snapshot of where they're at right now without understanding the nuance of where they've been before can lead us into making really poor training decisions and trying to do more than we've earned the right to do. And it's not that we can't do that, right? Humans can handle amazing training volumes, amazing training regimes. We have pushed the limits of human endurance to amazing things, right? We saw that with the Breaking 2 stuff with Kipchoge, and really cool what we can push our bodies to do. It's just, am I doing this in an organized, in an orderly, in a structured way, such that I'm allowing my body to get the stimulus for adaptation and also allowing for enough recovery for that training to change something in a meaningful way?
Yeah. Oh, you brought up how people want to follow what are these elite athletes doing, or what's your favorite trainer or whatever on Instagram. Oh, I want to do what she's doing or he's doing or eat what they're eating or things like that. What you don't realize is how long it took them to get to that point where they are doing that and doing it that way. And so if you follow their routine, that may not actually be a good idea. It's a really good way to get injured, especially with endurance athlete training. That is a really good way to get injured, to follow the same workouts that somebody else is doing that's been doing this for years or decades. Even we like to follow a lot of rising stars, people that hit the scene and make a big splash because they won an event or things. And you have to really be careful with what are they doing, because they'll often be doing something different, and it often doesn't work long term. So whatever they were doing helps them improve their capacity really quickly, and they have one good result, and then they you see a lot of flash in the pan athletes. So who you want to follow more is the people that have been around for like an 8 or 10 year career, people that are ending their career, and see what they did during their career versus the ones that win 1 or 2 events and then you never hear of them again. Really, really common that you see that versus the people that consistently win or are consistently at the top. Those are the training programs that are going to be more effective to follow, because they're typically a little bit more moderate, and you'll be in the game for longer than following the one that they just went all out all the time and they had a good result because they improved fast, but then their body just couldn't keep up with it. And so that we see all the time. And then the other issue is just not having enough time to adapt to the volumes and the intensities that these pro athletes are doing. And so we wind up training into an injury because we didn't earn the right to be able to run at those intensities and volumes.
Yeah. Well, and I think understanding also, what amount of time do those people have to devote, right? A lot of people in fitness and health and endurance, that is their job. They're an athlete. And so their training, their story is going to look different than yours.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And that's why we're doing this type of testing, is because as inspiring and as amazing as someone else's story might be, it's not your story. We want to find out what your story is so that you can have an amazing and an inspiring journey of your own.
Right. Well, your past, present, and future story, right? They all play into what can you reasonably do now to build to who you want to be in the future. I'm great with big goals.
Yeah.
I love it. But just make sure you have a realistic time horizon for that goal, and that you're able to commit to what it's going to take to get to that goal. I always tell people when they ask about marathon training, especially because it's just a long enough distance that you really do have to train for it to have the result that you want. It's okay, what's the result that you want? How do you want that day to go? And then I can tell you how long we need to train for that, right? Is this a this year, is this a next year, or is this in 5 years from now goal?
Yeah.
And that's okay to have it be 5 years from now goal. If you're taking a brand new runner who's not very fast and they say, I want to do a sub-3 marathon, I'm going to say, okay, great. I think we can get you there, but it may take a few years to get you there. And that's okay, because we want to do it where you enjoy the day, where you're not suffering afterwards, and we don't train you into an injury.
Yeah.
And so, that's going to be a couple of years. Could we get you there faster? Absolutely. Are you going to hate yourself during the process, during the race, and afterwards, and probably have some injuries? Yeah. But we could get you there faster. And so for me, I hate to sabotage somebody's long-term outlook for their today goal. And so I work with people on reasoning that out. And by showing them their metabolism with their metabolic test, we often can help them understand why sometimes those time horizons need to be a little bit longer. Or sometimes if they have the right engine already built and we just need to make some subtle tweaks, we really can pursue a goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Each test is going to tell a different story, and then we're just using that to support their goals. Yep. And we can see really, really amazing changes in the long term, which is so cool.
It's fun. Yeah.
So I think real quick, big picture.
Yeah.
Of a couple quick questions. So we're going to go over what do I want to do if I want to get faster, if I want to recover better, if I want to burn more fat, if I want to avoid injury, and if I want to live better longer. So let's start with I want to get faster, right? I'm doing pretty good. I want to get faster.
So honestly, all of these things are going to be variations on the same theme. Honestly. So a lot of these goals, the way to do that is very similar. So getting faster, a lot of strength training, and then build a really big base of zone 2 so that you can go high into your heart rate. But that takes you going zone 5 with all of your high intensity efforts. You have to really push it on your high intensity efforts. So you want a really big zone 2 base, and you want to really push that zone 5 so that you're building that VO2 max and building that high end capacity. You're working on the mechanics and metabolics of speed. So now if you want to get sprint faster, so I guess that's more long distance faster. If you want to get sprint faster, you're spending a ton of time in zone 5 and getting adequate recovery. You're doing a lot of sprint intervals and things like that and working on that. And your zone 2 still matters somewhat in that you build a big enough base that you can handle a high in training in volume without getting injured, but it's going to look a little bit different in your training, and you're just going to do a lot of sprints and a lot of strength training.
Yeah. One thing that I want to mention, we've talked about a lot about zone 5. We haven't really mentioned zone 4. I just want to mention that really quick. Still great for teaching our body to clear the lactate that it's producing as a byproduct and shuttle that to places that can be used. Yeah. So the heart, the kidneys, the brain, the liver, different things like that. Other skeletal muscle can use that as a fuel source. And so those efforts that aren't necessarily like targeting top end speed can improve our ability to handle metabolic byproduct and get it to where it can be used efficiently.
Yeah.
I want to mention that. One other thing that I'm going to add real quick, because something you said earlier made me think about it, is probably the biggest key in having our training match our goals is consistency. I think one of the things, and I don't know quite where it comes from, maybe we just get bored as human beings and we seek novelty, but I see people so often, they're like, I've done this for 6 weeks. I need to change everything up. Yeah. Right? I've done this exercise, I've done this strength training program, I've done this, endurance program for 6 weeks. Like, I need to change everything up. And it's like as if there's some magic switch at like a month or at 6 weeks where our body's like, you know what? I'm done with that. Like, that will happen. We'll start to plateau in either our strength or our muscle growth or our endurance. And so that is a good signal that it's time to tweak things. That doesn't mean that we throw the whole program out and start from scratch and build a completely new program. It's we look at, okay, well, what might be causing that plateau, right? Let's look into lifestyle. How is nutrition? How's your sleep? Is there low-hanging fruit that might be affecting your ability to improve that doesn't have as much to do with the training? It's maybe more on that recovery side of the bucket, and then doing those small tweaks to get you back on the improvement train. But I just see this all the time of like, I need variety. Right. Like, you don't need as much variety as you think, and not as often as you think.
Right.
And
you need more consistency.
You need more consistency, and that's the thing, is it's like I'm always changing, and then like we wonder like, oh, why do I keep getting injured? Why am I not making long-term progress? Yeah. And it's just sticking with the things that work, and then reflecting regularly, retesting regularly to say, is this training working? And if it is, okay, like, let's continue on this train. And if it's not, what do we need to change to make sure that you keep making progress? But again, it's not these just drastic changes. It's like we have this scaffolding, we have this framework, and then we have flexibility within that framework to move them in one direction or another. And so just slowing down and taking that big overview picture like you talked about, right? How do I want to train for health and fitness now, but I also want to be able to stay in the game, and what do I want to do for my 80-year-old self?
Yeah.
And being able to reflect back and have our future self say, hey, past self, thank you. You did me a solid. I know in my own life all too many times I'm like, past Marc is a jerk to future Marc, right?
All the time.
Like,
I feel that way all the time.
But in this way, right, can we look at the data? Can we play the long game and make decisions that are going to positively impact our health now and decades into the future?
Right.
So that we can continue to do all the things that we want. Like, that's what it's about at the end of the day. All of the training, all of the decisions, all of the nutrition, right, all of the lifestyle is so that we can live the life that we want to live, so that I can continue enjoying things with friends and families well into my later years. And that's part of why people so often come to tears when they're coming to you. I've tried everything. Why they're so frustrated? Because it's not just about the performance. It's about what their story means for their life. I don't get invited on friend trips anymore because they always go hiking and I can't do that anymore. Or even just walking, like that's hard. Or, my family knows that I'm just not going to be able to do this. And so it's giving people the data and then helping them apply it in a useful way so that they can begin to change the experiences that they're having, that they can begin to live that life they want to live. You and I talk about how metrics are important, but metrics don't matter to people in the end. What matters is the moments that they have doing the things that they love with the people that they love. And so just being able to take this data that we have and use it in such a meaningful way is just so cool, right? That we really can help people get over the spinning their wheels and hitting plateaus and dealing with frustration after frustration, and finally giving them the tools to succeed and to change for the better. And I think that's just a really awesome thing that we can do, and a really unique way to use the amazing tools that we have available to us in this day and age, right? Like this technology was not available in this form when the field of exercise physiology started, right? When we first started looking at performance. But now it's so accessible, and it's not just for the elite athletes, it's for everybody, right? From your average Joe all the way to your elite athlete. It's because, again, we all have metabolisms, right? We all process energy in similar ways. And so gleaning those insights into your individual metabolic profile can really give some amazing data to help you achieve the results that you've been longing to achieve.
Yeah. Well, and so whatever that goal is, we really can help you achieve that. So like we talked about, whether that's getting faster or recovering better was kind of the next one on the list. And recovering better, the idea is we just want to help you optimize all the things. So making sure you get better sleep, better nutrition. We can help with that with the VO2 test, with the resting VO2 test, by dialing in the nutrition. The sleep, I don't know that this will help with the sleep. The VO2 testing won't really help with the sleep. But getting quality sleep, and then just making sure that you're training, that you have enough of the zone 2 that you can recover, that you're not digging that hole. And you can recover better, feel better. That's one of my favorite things to hear when we switch somebody over, especially runners that are always, they feel a little beat up, that always have some niggles and things like that going on. And you really define their zone 2 and have them start training 80-20 with that high volume in their zone 2, and they come back. And the first time they come back, they're like, does it really have to be this slow? Like, this is so slow. Like, yeah, just stick with it, and it's going to be okay. And the next time they come back after that, they're like, hey, my slow has gotten way faster than it used to be. I'm able to go way faster than I was able to in the past, and I'm still in my zone 2. In fact, I'm almost to where I was running before, but I'm still in my zone 2. It's
and
working.
I feel better doing
And
it.
I feel better. But that's the thing. And he's like, and you know what I noticed? My knees don't hurt anymore. My feet don't hurt anymore. My plantar fasciitis is gone. My blah, blah, blah. Like, everything feels good. I've never felt this good running, at this intensity and volume. And it's very rewarding for me to have that, like, I told you so moment without having to say it. To have them say, you told me so, right, is really fun. And so being able to stick with that long enough. And so those things are really fun when you hear people like be able to report that. Okay, so the next one is how to train to burn more fat. And essentially it's zone 2 with some caveats to that. Not always is your zone 2 range so I guess where people like to train in zone 2 is always at the high end of zone 2, right at the border of zone 2 and zone 3. That may not always be where you're most efficient at burning fat. So there's effective range of fat burn, and then there's this, most efficient, highest fat burn point. Not always even most efficient, but most effective fat burn point. And that is often, if you're really targeting fat loss, hanging out in that zone. So it may be 5 or 10 beats per minute lower than the top of your zone 2, where you're really burn fat the best. That may be the case. That will likely change over time to get closer to that cutoff as you get more fit. But yeah, it's finding out. So some will call that the fat max point. And then I would say the other thing to do there is just build a better fat burning machine by lifting heavy weights.
Yeah.
Yeah. Avoiding injury. What do you think?
Again, that goes back to what we said about that 80-20 in terms of your endurance exercise. And again, strength training is going to come in here again.
Big into there.
Yeah. And like, it's just so funny to me because over the years you've looked and it's like, you see this debate between, we make so many things, these like false dichotomies, right?
Yeah.
It's either zone 2 or zone 4 and 5. It's either strength training or endurance training. And it's like, we need all of it, right? We need strong bones. We need strong muscles, tendons, right? We've talked before about how muscle is a great metabolic sink. It helps us to be more metabolically flexible. It can store fat. It can store glycogen. Like, muscle is so important. It really is, as some have called it, the organ of longevity. Yeah. And so having a good amount of strength training and pushing those edges, right? Lifting heavy enough that it has those effects on our tendons, on our bones, but then also switching it up, right?
Yeah.
There's a large range that we can make progress, but then like getting enough of that, a high enough volume of that low intensity training that we build that big base, and then making sure that we have, the speed, the efficiency, the power at that top end is really going to make us well-rounded and help us to avoid injury over the long term.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, those are the same things that are going to help us live a longer, better life.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff, like, you'll recognize that whatever the goal is, right? I want to get faster. I want to get better. I want to recover more. Like, there's going to be a lot of the same thing, like you mentioned. It's variations on a theme.
Yeah. Well, and that even following, to avoid injury, following that 80-20 rule, you have to vary that as well.
For sure.
So during race week, you might actually be more like 70-30 or 60-40, because that race effort, depending on the length of it, may be really long, and so it tips your balance. And so the next week after that, you may want to do 90-10 or 95-5 or, just do the low intensity stuff for a little bit with very little high intensity, because you're recovering from the other, or you're coming back from injury or illness or just a stressful week at work. You may switch to a 90-10 that week or a 95-5 that week because of those additional stressors, or poor sleep, or just had a baby, or whatever it is. Switching that up is a good idea. And so the 80-20 is kind of a general rule of thumb, and then we modify for your life and lifestyle. But if we want to avoid injury, thinking of keeping a really big base so that I'm as durable as possible, and then the high intensity work is there to help me keep improving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so it's that idea again of, I have a plan that provides me enough structure that I'm moving in the direction of my goals, but also enough flexibility that allows life to happen just as it does, and to be able to, bob and weave. And so, like, this is where we get into the danger zone sometimes, is that things become like, this is an absolute rule. If you go more than 80%, if you go more than,
right. Absolutes and yeah, you just have to be careful the words that people are using when they're talking about things. If they're using absolute terms, can't, never, always, whatever, be very cautious of that. Versus, here's our goal, and we're going to work on getting there.
Yeah. And so much of science is a game of probabilities, right?
So much.
Like, if I'm doing that 80-20, I might still get injured, but my probability of getting injured is much lower versus if all my training is high intensity and I haven't adapted to handle the volume of training that I'm doing. And so it's like, it's like, same thing with wearing a seatbelt. Like, I might still get in a car crash and get injured with a seatbelt, but more often than not, when I wear a seatbelt, it's going to protect my life. It's going to save me. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so just understanding that it's not this, like, these absolutes, that there is room for variability, right? That it's probabilities, not absolutes.
Yep.
Okay.
Awesome.
That was a long conversation. A lot of good stuff. But again, I think just understanding that each person has their own story and being able to look at that past, present, future, and what are we going to do with all of that to make that better future.
Yeah.
Love it.
Love it.
As always, remember to like, follow, and subscribe for more of this content, and we will catch you next time. This podcast is a production of Core Medical Technologies. Ready to take your metabolic testing to the next level? Visit core.com to learn more about purchasing our metabolic test equipment.